But now I want to share with you how I came to faith in Jesus Christ. Now, I just want to say I'm not a theologian and I'm not a philosopher. And most Veritas forums bring in philosophers and theologians, and if they're not philosophers and theologians, they're very well read in those areas. I've read nothing in those areas. I don't know anything about theology, and I don't know anything about philosophy. So if you've come here and you're going to have questions about what some great philosopher has said, I'm just going to have to trust you that they said that, because I can't verify that. I don't know. And if you throw at me terms that are philosophical terms, I'm just going to look starry-eyed. I just don't know that area. So I'm just a simple chemist. That's what I am. All right? This was the first verse that I ever read from the Bible that I ever thought about. I was 18 years old. I had just gone to college. I had just turned 18. I was a freshman in college. And it was in August of my freshman year. I was in the laundry room doing my first load of laundry there in college, and there was another young man in there, and we got to talking, and he was a year ahead of me. I was a freshman. He was a sophomore. He was on the Syracuse University football team as a quarterback, like a third-string quarterback. And I said, "What do you want to do when you get done with school? You want to play professional football?" He says, "Oh, no, I'm not good enough for that." I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" He says, "Oh, well, maybe lay ministry." Well, to give you an idea of my background, I'm from a secular Jewish home, born in New York City, and I didn't know what lay ministry was. And I said, "What's lay ministry? I've never heard of that." He said, "Oh, like a missionary?" It's missionary. We don't need missionaries today. This is 1977. Why do we need missionaries today? We got TV. TV can do everything. And he told me he wanted to give me an illustration of the gospel. So I'm going to tell you some of the very things that he told me. He says, "Do you mind me giving you an illustration?" I thought he was going to draw me a picture. I said, "Sure." And he had me read a verse from the Bible, and this was the first verse. And he had me read it. "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." And when I read this verse, I looked at him and I said, "I'm not a sinner." And he was a bit taken back by that. Now, sin is not something that secular Jews in New York think about. This was never, ever a topic in our home. We never discussed sin. We never discussed God. We never discussed any of this. We went to, as far as sin is concerned, as far as I knew, you go to synagogue once a year and the rabbi takes care of all of that. And we never really thought about it. At least I never did. And then lo and behold, I understood Christians. Every thought, sin? I mean, everything is constructed around this. But it was a new concept to me, and I said, "I'm not a sinner." And he looked a bit bewildered, and he had me read another verse. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I read this verse, and it was as if a knife had been stabbed right in my heart. Because when I was 14 years old, I started working in a gas station on the highway going in and out of New York City. There was one on each side of the road by the same owner, and I worked both sides. I told the owner I was 16. I was 14 years old. They didn't check paperwork back in those days, and I guess many don't check paperwork anymore. But I learned that when I cleaned the parking lots on Friday nights, that I could find an amazing stash of pornographic magazines as the salesmen on their way home on Friday nights would throw them out. And I became addicted to pornography at a young age, at the age of 14, and by the time I was 18, I was well addicted. And I didn't think anybody knew that. And then this man named Jesus Christ said something 2,000 years ago that just zeroed right in on my heart. And for any of you who have ever been or are addicted to pornography, in my day, at that time, there was no internet. It's much easier now to get addicted to it. You understand how compelling that can be. And I couldn't get this off my mind. Then he had me read another verse. But God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. I didn't even know that there was a claim on the table that Christ died for me. You would think that someone growing up in the United States, born and raised in New York, would have heard this somewhere. And I'm sure that I heard it on some TV program. I remember when I was working in the gas station, people would come in and give me a little tract sometimes, and I'd sit on the night shift and read these sometimes, but nothing ever registered. But all of a sudden, after reading this verse and then this verse, somebody died for me. And then I read that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And what an odd verse. That if I confess with my mouth Jesus is Lord, well, that's pretty simple to do. But believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead. Who could believe in a physical resurrection? Who could believe in such a thing? How could any thinking man or woman ever believe in a physical resurrection? Were it not for the case that it's true. And God has set it in the hearts of men and women to believe that very truth. Could that be? Could it be? I was living at the time in that room. Room 1812 of the Lawrenson Dormitory on the Syracuse University campus. And then on November 7th, 1977, so a couple months after I had heard this, that word still was penetrating into my heart. And I don't know to this day what motivated me to do this. This is something that had never been demonstrated to me in Christianity or in Judaism. I got down on my knees and I said, Father, forgive me because I'm a sinner. I'm just telling you what I did. It's a very simple story. At that moment, it was as if somebody was in my room. I was all alone. My roommate wasn't there. And I remember opening my eyes because I felt somebody was in my room. And I didn't see anyone. But somebody was there. And all of a sudden, there was this rush of cleansing over me. And this feeling of conviction that I had about that lust in my heart from pornography just went away. And I started weeping. What a strange experience for some Jewish kid from New York City to read a few verses. And I didn't want to get up because I loved the presence of whoever was in my room. Something happened to me and I didn't know what I was going to do, what I was going to say. And I remember a couple weeks later, this young man who had shared these few verses with me looked at me one day, a couple weeks after this event. I didn't tell anybody. What's this kid from New York going to say, this Jewish kid? What am I going to do? And he said to me, Jim, have you asked Jesus into your heart? I said, I think I have. Why do you ask? He said, you haven't stopped smiling for weeks. Something is different. And I sure felt different. Something happened to me on that day. And I'll tell you the other thing that happened to me on that day, which is really remarkable. There was no longer any hold of pornography over me. All of my magazines went in the trash, and never, all of these years, has pornography been trouble for me again. Now, this is very unusual. I have seen many men come to faith. I did prison ministry in a maximum security prison for 10 years, worked with many men with many struggles. It is very rare that somebody on the day of salvation gets delivered in this way. But what's interesting is that I was convicted of my sin through pornography. And on the day that I received Jesus, something changed in me. Now I'll tell you what happened in my career as a result. So some of the results of that experience and decision to follow Jesus Christ. We'll look at my career, what happened. The results of the decision that I made to follow Jesus. What happened in my life as a result. I was striving to overcome sin. Something that I had never worried about before. I was striving to overcome sin. I had a lot of struggles on that day that took years to work through, some that I still deal with now, but it affects me. That's something that never happened to me before. It started affecting me, and I wanted to do what was right. Just from that event, from that day, that event, that started to change in my life. I started reading the Bible every day. Every day I started reading the Bible. So I read the Bible today. My pattern is this. I start in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And I read through to Revelation chapter 22. When I'm done, I start again. And I just pick up where I stopped reading the day before. And I've been doing this for over 30 years. And I'm not in any hurry. I don't do it once a year. Wherever I am, I just pick up and read. And when I feel God speaking to me, I just read it over and over again. I'm in no hurry. But I just start reading it over and over again, and I love it. Just love it. I started seeking like-minded friends. And I started seeking people that were like-minded. And I joined a church, and I was really mentored by godly men, people that I really respected. You know, this whole idea of mentoring, we believe it in the academic realm. You know, I'm mentoring 20 graduate students and 10 postdocs right now. We believe in this in the academic world. But how about in the social world and faith-based world and emotional world? And so I started meeting men that I thought, boy, it'd be nice to be more like this person. They seem to have their act together. And I started praying that God would provide me with a wife that He had for me. I realized that was going to be a pretty important decision. And I started to pray for it. And then, this is a big thing that is going to apply to many of you. I actively started praying for God's blessing upon my studies. I was struggling in freshman chemistry. I really was. I was never very smart, never very good. And you know, my sister was just one of these people who was off the charts in everything. I mean, 800 SATs, everything. And one of those sisters. And then I had a brother. That was my older sister. My older brother, and she's now head of Microsoft Research. After she served for many years as a professor at UCLA. My brother was one of these guys that always did well and never had to work very hard. Now he's a lawyer. I don't know what that means. I mean, if I were at a different institution, nobody would have laughed. But I was struggling with freshman chemistry because I was dropped into the honors courses because they felt I was a chemistry major, so I ought to be in there. I needed to be in with the masses, just the regular people. I started praying about my work. I ended up graduating, getting out of that semester with a B+ in freshman chemistry. After that, I took so much chemistry that I took every graduate course in organic chemistry as an undergraduate and was at the top of every one of the classes. God really blessed my work. And go figure, God answers prayer. Really amazing. This is something I started to experience. I'll give you lots of examples from this. So there was this admonition to change my words and my actions. This is the impact upon my career. I was moved to change my words and my actions because of studying of the Scriptures. I'll give you an example. It says in Proverbs 3, verse 3 and 4, "Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and men." This transcends faith. I don't care what your faith is. You do this. You don't let kindness and truth leave you. You bind it around your neck. Write it on the tablet of your heart. You're going to find favor in the eyes of many other people. If you speak honestly and you do the right thing, this will serve you very well in your career. As a result, I started to change the words that I use. Even to this day, when I'm going into a hard meeting and I know I'm ready to, because I am a type A person. God checks me. Don't let kindness and truth leave you. Bind it around your neck. Write it on the tablet of your heart. I know when I'm writing a sharp email because my fingers start pounding really hard. And I have to back off. Thank you so much for doing this. You are so valuable to this institution. Gets me a lot of points with people by doing this. The things that I do. Let me talk about software. When I started as an assistant professor, I got my first computer, first desktop computer. It was a great computer, state of the art. It was a Mac SE with 1 megabyte of RAM. I mean, it had all of this memory. What are you going to do with 1 megabyte? It was great. And then the next year, they came out with the Mac SE 30. 30 megabytes. You could keep 2 programs open at the same time. And I gave that to the students in the lab, and I bought another set of software. And then this group started growing. I bought another. My colleagues said, what are you doing? Computers in those days didn't talk to each other. They said, just don't buy another set of software. Just put that set of software for that computer in that one. I said, oh, well, I called the companies, and they said I can't do that, that I have to use it. And they shook their heads. They said, you're crazy. But I knew this verse. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. My colleagues, when they were struggling for grant money, I would have grant program managers call me at the end of the year and say, we got this chunk of extra money. Can you use it? There is great blessing in doing what is right. If I were you, but I'm not, but if I were, I wouldn't want any software on my devices that I didn't own or any music. And I tell my group every year, if there's any software that's drifted onto our computers that we don't own, get rid of it. And if we really need it, let me know, I will buy it. Because I have received so many blessings by being honest. And this is just one area that I think students these days can understand. Admonition to value my family. This is an important thing. You think this is a given. Just get married and we'll live happily ever after. You know, if we really love each other, we'll be okay. Well, I work with a lot of students, and I've never known anybody to get married when they didn't love each other. I'm sure it happens sometimes, but generally doesn't happen. So love in itself doesn't make marriages last forever. The scriptures say, let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. This is a very interesting verse. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. That I should treasure my family. Now, I came from a functional home. I didn't come from a dysfunctional home. I had a mother and a father. Now, my father was a nice guy. And I love my father. I still speak with my parents every week. Every Sunday we speak together on the phone. My parents are both alive. But my father did what men do in that generation. What men did is they put food on the table. They worked hard, put food on the table, and then that's what was expected of a father, and that's what he did. And he did a good job of it. But God was calling me to more. And I learned this through the scriptures. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, he will not depart from it. You know, I read verses like this, and I started investing in the life of my children. And we did things. We did things for this. So, for example, we had family prayer times. Daily family prayer times. So I would wake up my kids at 5:30 in the morning. I do it to this day. We have one kid left at home. He's 17. Still 5:30 in the morning. I wake him up, and my wife and I meet with him, and we read the Bible together, and we pray together, and I'm out of the house by 6. I leave my house at 6 in the morning. And on Saturdays, I sleep in. I don't leave until about 8. So I'd leave normally 6 in the morning, and I'd come home at 6 in the evening. But at 6 in the evening, we'd have dinner together, and then I'd put the kids to bed, starting with the youngest to the oldest. Because, where did I learn this? The scriptures. Because of the decision that I made, this changed my career. And this has added enormous balance in my career. Hard work, but I implored God to help me to raise my children because parenting is the hardest task. For anybody who is a parent here, you will understand this. I was just speaking with 2 other professors today, and we were talking about our children. Just today. First thing, how are your kids? They're talking about, oh, my daughter's this, my son's this. And immediately I say, isn't it amazing how much CPU time we devote to wanting our children to do well in life? To wanting their good. You know, you'd think nano cars would consume me. And graphene. You know what consumes me? Is the good of my children. This is a precious thing. And you will be all the better of a scientist, of an engineer, if you learn to value your family and treasure them. Because they will make you much better. On the days when I had great discouragements, my family was there to encourage me. My family was there to stand by me. And many of my colleagues asked me how. This is Rick Smalley, won the 1996 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of C60, Buckminster fullerene. He was a good friend of mine. He used to ask me, how do you do it? How do you do it? Because this thing in life of having a family and having children that love you as adult children, and having a wife or having a husband that you stay married to the rest of your life is a treasure that people will value around you. Doesn't matter how great a scientist they are, they go, wow, how do you do that? The admonition to fear God and keep His commandments. The conclusion when all has been heard, this is, Solomon wrote this, is fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to everyone. If you do what is right, you will go far in your career. If you work honestly and uprightly, you will go far in your career. This is what the Scriptures taught me. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, Jesus said. I mean, how simple is that? If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And Jesus said, if you keep my commandments, you'll abide in my love. God will love me if I keep His commandments. This is what I was learning, just reading the Scriptures. I'll give you some applications of the Scriptures. This is an event that happened September 3rd, 1993. I had just gotten tenure. And I was invited back. I got my PhD at Purdue University, and I'd been invited back to give a talk at Purdue. So I got tenure very quickly, and God really blessed my work, and I was praying that morning. And I pray before I give a seminar. Can you believe that? I pray before I give a chemistry seminar. Is that allowed? And I prayed that God would really bless it. Really bless it. It's just going to be talking about chemistry. It's actually going to be speaking about well-defined oligomers. You know, you make them 50 angstroms, 100 angstroms, well-defined, precisely defined oligomers. And as I was praying, I read this verse that particular morning, and I was staying in the Purdue Memorial Union and Hotel. Truly I say to you that if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, it will happen. So I said, Lord, you're really raising my faith. I pray it's the best seminar ever in that department. Ever. And I said, well, how will I know it's the best? The department's 100 years old. How am I going to know? I said, Lord, if it's the best, I pray that my professor, my mentor would say that it was a super seminar. Because every time I brought him a result as a graduate student, no matter how good it was, and some of them were really good, he'd come up to me and say, pretty good, for your level. I never got past this man's waist. So I prayed that he would say it was super, something totally out of character for him. So when I got done with this seminar, H. Negishi, my mentor, who 30 years later received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for palladium-catalyzed cross-coupling reaction, he was sitting right on the front row. And as soon as I got done, he stood up, he raised his hand, he said, super, super! Sitting right behind him was H.C. Brown, who won the Nobel Prize in 1979 for the hydroboration reaction. And he was in his 80s at the time, and I stepped off the stage, and I stepped off the podium, and I went down and I shook his hand. He was sitting right behind Negishi, right on the end where he always normally sat. Nobody else sat in that seat. And I said, thank you for coming to the seminar today. He says, I want to tell you something. That was the best seminar I have ever heard in my entire life. And I said, that's very kind of you to say that. And he, in typical Nobel Prize winning fashion, said, I'm not saying it to be kind, I really mean it. Here's another application. One time I was upset with a colleague. You ever get upset with a colleague? This colleague was saying things about me to other students and to undergrads and things, and I knew why he was saying, because my career had just blossomed, and his career was not blossoming. And so I went across the hall, knocked on his door, and I was really going to give it to him, and when I knocked, no answer. He wasn't in. And then I had been memorizing this verse with my kids. But I say to you here, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. That's a tough one. That is really a tough one. But as soon as that came to my mind and my heart, I said, okay, fine, Lord, I'll do it. And I would go to the chapel. This is when I taught for 11 years at the University of South Carolina, the Rutledge Chapel. And From the time I was an undergraduate, I was always break at noontime. Somewhere around the middle of the day, I'd go to the chapel and pray. And I still do that. Is that okay? Still do that. It's allowed, right? I haven't violated any laws, I don't think. So I would go and I would pray. And I said, I will pray for his work every day, that God would bless his work. Because I am told that I had to bless those and pray for him. And I went and I prayed for him every day. And after about 2 years, his program got so big and so good and so successful, he got an offer from another university. He accepted the offer and he left. And I was so happy. This really works in helping your career. So let me close out with giving you a few things that I think about. Pondering God in science, seeking to understand. On the left side there is a cartoon of what we called a molecular computer. And we called it a molecular computer because when we had proposed it to DARPA, we called it a synthetic brain. And they thought they were going to get in trouble with a topic like that. And so it turned out a decade later they had the synthetic brain project. But we took a disordered array of molecules, just throw it in there, and then we give voltage pulses from the side and try to program it to do something useful. And my colleagues in engineering, in computer science, said we could never solve this thing because what you get set up is a series of nonlinear differential equations, a whole series of them to try to solve this. And my colleagues said it couldn't be solved. And so what I did is I hired 2 graduate students from computer and applied mathematics, and I never told them that it couldn't be solved. And they solved it. And now I have a position in the computer science department at Rice. So I thought a lot about brains and how they work and how they structure, and we worked very hard to get simple gates, AND gates, OR gates, and we got NAND there. You know, with NAND you can do everything. Now you have negation, you can do it all. But very simple systems. And then I'd watch a mosquito come flying around me. And they say, you know, in the brain of that mosquito, tiny little brain, it's far more sophisticated than my little hack synthetic brain, that I can maybe get an AND gate, an OR gate. And this mosquito, and I would just watch it. And it would sense I'm there. And it would come, sting, and then release other chemicals to call its friends that there's a hunk of meat here, come. Very sophisticated. And then in flight, you go try to hit a mosquito. You got to be pretty fast. I mean, in flight. And how able they are. And I've just read recently how mosquitoes survive in a rainstorm. You'd think they'd all die. They don't. They actually ride the raindrop. They ride the raindrop and then flip off it before it lands. It's really amazing. All of that in this little brain. So people think, does science draw me away from God? And it's just the opposite. When I study biological systems, it's like, wow. This to me is so amazing. How this happens. It is understandable as we understand more. But it draws me closer to God. When I have a 2-year-old child come running to me, I'm amazed at how they can walk, how they can think, how they can reason. I try to teach them to speak. My child says, I put it over there. And I want to correct them. No, you put it over there, not put it. But put it is very correct. It's just that in English, with short words, we don't put ed at the end. I will put, I did put, it's all the same. But the child is thinking very logically. I put it over there. That's what he should say. I mean, the brain is so amazing. So I see this amazing order, and it causes me to love God all the more. That's what it causes me to do. Again, let me say, I'm not a theologian. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a chemist. I have faith. I love God. It's a simple thing. But I'll answer any questions that you might have. I'll try to. Thank you.